All right, it's the top of the hour. Welcome everyone to our exclusive webinar for Gartner Symposium attendees, all about unified archiving. My name is Sheldon Mills. I'm a digital marketing manager here at Guava. I just want to start off by thanking all of you who came and saw us at the Gartner Symposium. Stopped by our booth. It was a great event, and we hope you made great connections, benefit from all of that. This is going to be a Q&A session. We'll be covering some of the things that was highlighted in the conference, but much, much more. Before we start, we did want to, we have an exciting announcement. You probably already know this, but Guava is now part of Micro Focus, and we're really excited for this change and what it means for our current and potential partners, customers. This acquisition, it greatly increases Guava's brand. I mean, the product offerings and it helps us to better support you. So we're really excited, and we think you should be too. So today we're going to have a Q&A session addressing questions we frequently get regarding archiving electronic communication, best practices, retain, and our unified archiving solution. And joining me today is Q Mangus, the Director of Product Marketing here at Guava.
Welcome everyone. We're really excited to bring this presentation today, and as Sheldon said, we're really excited to be part of the Micro Focus group now, and excited for what that means. So we're really glad that you could all join us, and hope you benefit from the information that we present today on unified archiving. So thanks again everyone for being here, and yeah, well, we'll get started.
Awesome, thanks Q. Let's see, any other things we need to wrap up real quick? Yes, let's get started with the presentation. I'll be fielding questions and Q will be answering them. We have a number of things we want to get through. However, the most important questions are your questions. So as we go through the webinar, please put those through in the chat, and those are the ones we want to highlight first and foremost. Like I said, we have a lot of the most frequently asked questions, but anything specific you have, that's what we really want to address. So I guess without further ado, we can get started. First question, get this all the time. Why do I need to archive, and what are the reasons to do that?
Perfect, great question. Yes, this is probably one of our biggest things that we get asked all the time is the why, right? Why should I be archiving? So I'm going to go through a few things here on the reasons why you should be archiving. First, I just wanted to make mention of some of the things that are on many IT people and CIOs' minds when it comes to their IT infrastructure in general. Some things that really concern them, and this really has to do with archiving as well, is the ability to be in compliance with regulations. I know we're going to talk about that today. Being able to manage your data, being able to have the information governance. This kind of goes along with data management. Being able to make sure that all your data is in a location that you can easily access, that you can manage that data, and then of course that data is secure. And this is especially true depending on what country you're in for data sovereignty. We know this is especially big for those European countries, and I know there's a few of those on the call today that are probably in that situation where you really have to be mindful of where your data is located and how it's accessible. And it's also important that data sovereignty is important for regulated industries as well. And then, of course, that data needs to be secure, and then you need to be able to quickly and easily access it. And so I wanted to mention these things because these are things that are probably weighing on your mind. And that and so to answer the question is why should I be archiving? This is kind of the why. You are concerned with these things. There are these things that are probably top of your mind, and archiving can help you with them. They can help you be in compliance with regulations. They can help you. Archiving can help you manage your data. It can help you with information governance, and it can comply with data sovereignty. And then, of course, a good archiving solution would be able to provide you with tools to be able to perform e-discovery. So this is the kind of the why, is to be able to address these concerns. There's a little bit more too. For example, this is something we talk about a lot, that Gartner has found that about 46% of organizations have had an e-discovery request in the past 12 months. Think about that. The past 12 months, most or a good portion of organizations have been involved in e-discovery. So that's something to be concerned about, is how you're going to deal with that if you're faced with that, and that's why you should be archiving. Another thing that was found is that about 75% of companies that are global could be involved in legal or regulatory action by the end of the year. So once again, the idea between these two stats is that if you haven't had to deal with e-discovery or litigation, you're probably going to have to deal with it. And that's where archiving can help. It can get you prepared in case of e-discovery or litigation, because you'll be able to quickly and easily produce information that is required by that e-discovery or litigation request. Another reason to archive, that's a big one, is that data is growing, right? Your data that you have in your organization is growing every year. Oh, there's a typo on my slide here. Sorry about that. But the idea is 40 to 60% of your data that is stored will grow each year. So how do you manage that data? How do you make sure that you have control over that? And then, of course, that data starts to become outdated and redundant and trivial and even risky. So about 15 to 60% of the data that's sitting on your system is something that's become outdated, redundant, or trivial. And worst of all, it's something that could be of a risk to your organization, right? Because there's data that can be leaked out to where it can be shared that shouldn't be shared. You might have information that's on there that could, defensively be deleted. There's this idea of defensible deletion. So you could possibly have stuff on your system right now that shouldn't be. And so that's the other reason why you need to have the ability to archive, so that you can have policies and you can have things in place to make sure that you're just keeping what you're supposed to be and that what you need to, and that you can easily and quickly get to that. So those are the reasons to archive, right? You have what I talked about, right? Compliance, managing your data, security, and then this idea that data can continue to grow and it becomes outdated, and that you could possibly at some point be involved in litigation. So those are really your reasons why you should be archiving.
Awesome. Right along with that question on why do I need to archive, we get this all the time about the regulations that affect archiving. So, what regulations could affect what and how an organization archives?
Good. That's a big question. And it depends on the industry. So here's some concerns that industries have, right? Quickly, you know that these are some of your concerns, and building on that, these are the regulations that really could affect you. This is a brief view of them. There are more than this, but I just want to highlight quickly, depending on your industry. And one that I realized that it's not on this slide is education, which is also governed by a lot of these, like FERPA is for education. They basically covers a lot of what these other regulations do. So in government, you have the Freedom of Information Act, FSMA, State Sunshine Laws, Federal Records Act, the Presidential and Federal Records Act Amendment of 2014, the Presidential Memorandum, which talks about managing government records. Basically, what all of these regulations for government state is that you need to be able to archive your electronic communication, your email, social media, and mobile communication that is involved in any official communication. And it needs to be quickly and easily accessible. That's kind of what the later acts talk about, is that you need to be able to archive that. You need to be able to have it in a location where you can access it. And in the case of FOIA, you need to be able to quickly get to it if there's ever a FOIA request. So that's big for government. For healthcare, the big ones are HIPAA and high tech. And basically these regulations state that personal health information can't be part of record, or if it is, it needs to be encrypted and secure. And so an archiving solution can help you to be able to maintain records in case of litigation, but it can also help you be able to prove and show that communication is correct, and that those types of information like public health records and things that shouldn't be part of the record are not being communicated. For financial, there is a ton. If you're in the financial industry, whether it's banking or trade groups or mortgage, etc., you have a lot that you need to worry about. And there's FINRA rules, there's the SEC rules, NASD, IROC for Canada, Sarbanes-Oxley, Dodd-Frank, Graham-Leach-Bliley Act. So there's a lot of them. And these regulations, once again, affect what you do. So like, let's take, for example, the Dodd-Frank Act. The big thing there is that you need to be able to produce items from a request within 72 hours. So if regulators come in and say, hey, look, we think that there's bad practices, that there's unfair trading practices that you're involved in, you need to come and produce your records on what you've been communicating. You need to do that within 72 hours. So that's a tall order, right? And that's why it's important to archive, because a good archiving solution can help you produce that in a timely manner. And then these other regulations, they all have specific items that they go over. But really, the idea, once again, the heart and the crux of it is that any of your employee communication, especially if they're communicating with customers, needs to be archived and stored and easily accessible. And then, of course, for any other organization and other industries, you have the federal rules of civil procedure. And basically, that is, if you're involved in litigation, you need to be able to produce relevant and pertinent communications. So whether that's email, social media, or mobile. In fact, about a year ago, it'll be a year next month, the rules were amended to say that social media has as much weight as email communication when it comes to how the courts view it. So you need to be able to archive social media in addition to just email. It's more than just email now. You have to have all of your electronic communication. And so those are some of the regulations. Be aware of them and just know that they're pushing you now to archive your email, social media, and mobile communication, and you need to be able to easily and quickly access it.
Awesome. So you mentioned with the federal rules of civil procedure about social media and mobile and whatnot. So it's a perfect segue into this next question we get all the time. So, email is pretty obvious, but what should a company be archiving? It's obviously more than just email. What should we do?
So this slide here is really interesting. This was done by Austrian Research recently. Um, and it shows that most organizations are archiving email. And actually, I believe that stat's probably a little high based on the conversations that I have. Um, but in his survey, he found that about 96% of people are archiving email. Not as many are archiving files or instant messaging, and then it gets even lower if you go into social media and then mobile communication. But the idea is that you need to be archiving email, and you need to be archiving your social media communication and mobile communication. That's essential. Um, Email is the bare minimum, right? And like we just talked about with FRCP changing things, social media is really big there too. So you really need to be archiving that. So the idea is you need to archive email. You need to be archiving all the email content. That's um, email email messages, the attachments that go along with the email, appointments, calendars, shared folders, um, tasks, assignments, all, and then personal folders as well, all need to be archived. When it comes to social media, any kind of social media where your organization is posting things in an official manner, so your corporate social media accounts, any employee accounts that are communicating in an official manner also need to be archived. And then for mobile communication, it's the same thing. If there's any of your employees that are using their device to be able to communicate in an official manner, that needs to be archived as well. So that's the idea, is these are the kind of things that need to be archived. And if you do that, you know you're safe and that you're complying with regulations, and that more than anything, you can manage your data and make sure that you're only keeping what you need to, and that you can quickly and easily get to that.
So I guess let's break this down a little bit. How can Retain help organizations using Exchange or Office 365?
So that's a good one. That's a good question. I think that the reason why that question is brought up is because those are kind of the biggest two platforms out there, right? Is Exchange and Office 365. So some of the things that to take note of is that Exchange and Office 365 do have archiving capabilities, but the big thing to remember with those is that it only supports archiving of that email platform. So if it's Office 365, it's only going to archive Office 365 email. If it's Exchange, it's only going to archive Exchange. If you have any other kind of email platform in your organization, it's not going to be supported with the built-in archiving. Um, and then when it comes specifically to Office 365, to be able to archive, it's a great platform. Office 365 and Exchange they're the most popular platforms out there, and so the communication part of it is amazing, and people are familiar with it, and it's great for communicating. And the archiving piece of Office 365 has come a long way. However, there's still a lot of things that are missing, and there are ways to overcome that by using another solution. So just some other things just to be aware of if you're looking at archiving with the built-in archiving with Office 365 is you'd have to have an E3 or higher level plan. Once again, it doesn't support other types of platforms like social media and mobile communication or multiple email communication systems. There's not an ability to perform redaction. Um, So really, that's the idea is that there's some things missing within the built-in archiving of Office 365 and Exchange, and there is a way to overcome that, and that is with the archiving solution that we provide with Retain. So the Retain Unified Archiving, when it comes to Office 365 and Exchange specifically, is Retain can archive all Office 365 plans. So if you have people in your organization that are only on E1 and you want to be able to archive them, you don't have to move them up to E3 or E5. Retain can archive them. Then, of course, there's the built-in litigation support with e-discovery and redaction. And you can archive multi-platform email, mobile, and social media, in addition to mobile communication with iOS, Android, and BlackBerry. So that's the advice we have for those using Office 365 and Exchange, is that they're great tools, and we understand why so many people have moved to those solutions. However, the built-in archiving that is in those solutions has a lot that's missing, a lot left to be desired, we should say. And so using a third-party solution like Retain, and Retain in specific, has ways to add value or supercharge your Office 365 and Exchange investment.
Let's switch over to mobile for just a second. Do you have any advice? We get questions about this advice on archiving mobile devices. Especially about what do you do about BYOD? Bringing your own device to work.
So that's huge. That's probably on the top of a lot of people's minds right now, right? We know that mobile devices are everywhere, right? I would imagine that in your organization you have a number of mobile devices, and I would bet anything that they're not corporate issued devices. Now, that's not to say that there aren't organizations that do that, but I would say most people are their employees are bringing their own device. And so, as I stated earlier, that mobile communication needs to be viewed the same as email or social media for archiving. And so, you need to be able to have that communication archived, and you need to have oversight. So the idea is, and kind of the base, the foundation that you need to build from, is that you need to have a communication policy for mobile. That mobile communication policy needs to state what employees can and cannot do. If they can bring their own device and how that's going to work. Or if you're going to issue them a device, what they can and cannot communicate. So the big thing is, right off the bat, is to have a policy. And that policy needs to be clear. Your employees need to have training on that. And they need to sign it too. So that they know and you know that they know what it's in there. And then you need to have technology to enforce that policy. So you need to have a solution that will take mobile communication and archive it in a way that you can quickly and easily get to it. Now, Sheldon asked about BYOD. So this is a big thing, right? Is that, as I stated earlier, you probably have a lot of employees using their own device at work. There is a concept called dual persona, and I'll get into that a little bit more, but dual persona is the best way for you to deal with BYOD. And what dual persona does is it gives you the ability to partition your phone so that personal stuff stays personal. So let's say in the case of an iOS device, they can use iMessage to communicate personally and use the native dialer. And then they can use a separate app to be able to communicate in a business function and text that way as well. So that's the idea, is that the best case for using BYOD would be to be able to have that dual persona for your employees. So once again, I just want to reiterate that you need to have a communication policy. It needs to be clear. They need to be trained on it, and then you need technology to enforce that policy.
Let's jump into social media then after this. You mentioned needs to be archived. Should I allow my employees access to social media at work? What about a company's social media account? Can you actually archive something as personal as someone's social media?
So that's great. That's very similar to mobile, meaning I'm going to state this again, and I'm going to hit on this a lot, and I do that a lot, and that is I'm going to actually skip to one other slide just to hit it. You need to have a policy for social media, just as you need to for mobile. And I'm going to go so far as you need to just have a communication policy. So your email, your social media, mobile should be under that policy. It should state what you can and can't do on social media, what you can and cannot access, how you can communicate with social media in an official manner. It needs to be clear. You need to train, and then the technology must validate that policy. So if you don't have a policy in your organization on what your employees can communicate on social media, mobile, and email, you need to get one. You need to get one right after this call. And actually, we have a sample social media policy that you can kind of build from, and I'll make sure to put that through in the chat here in a little bit, so you can look at that if you're interested. But then when it comes to social media, really you need to be able to absolutely archive all your corporate social media accounts. You need to be able to have that history of what has been placed onto corporate social media, who's been communicating with you there, and then when it comes to certain types of social media, let's say it's YouTube, we can kind of look at that as social, right? You need to be able to have a history of like videos that have been posted up there, comments that are there. So first and foremost, corporate social media is a must. You need to be able to archive that and quickly and easily access it. When it comes to employee social media accounts, you really need to be archiving it if they are communicating in an official manner. So if they have a social media account where they're communicating with employees, you need to be able to archive that and have oversight of that. And so that's where the policy comes into play. If your policy needs to show, and like I said, I'm not going to state what your policy needs to be in the sense that you need to do that in your organization and talk to your legal team. So I'm not giving any legal advice here. But the idea is your policy needs to outline what is appropriate and what isn't. And it would be a good idea for you to say and look at if your employees should be able to communicate with their social media accounts with your customers. And if you want them to, then they need to know that that's going to be archived. Furthermore, you need to be able to have alerts for keywords, questions, and personal identifiable info. That's something important when it comes to your corporate social account. If people are posting things on there that you don't want them to, or you see things come in that is against your policies, or maybe if there's a question on your social media account, you need to quickly and easily get an alert of that, and that can be done with a proper archiving solution as well. And then, of course, by having a record of what's going on, you can actually prevent negative things from happening or inappropriate content, because your employees will know that their communication could be archived, and that will prevent them from doing things that they shouldn't be. And in the case of regulation compliance and litigation readiness, by having an archive and being able to quickly and easily access that, you can be in compliance.
Thank you. That's a lot of good information, Q. Let's jump into Retain, how about, and how Retain can help with all these things. So how is Retain, first off, different from other archiving solutions?
That's a big one. And we've kind of put in about 15 different ways in which Retain is different from other archiving solutions. And this is why we view it as kind of the choice for those in the marketplace, is because because of these things. Now, there's more to retain than just these 15 things, but these are the things that really make it different. And the biggest part of it is what we like to call unified archiving. So, unified archiving is this idea that Retain supports multiple email platforms. So if you're running multiple email systems, like this happens a lot for organizations, especially universities, we've seen this a lot, that they'll run, say, Office 365 for their main staff, and then auxiliary staff runs Gmail. Or maybe you're in a situation where one part of your company is running Exchange and you've moved others to Office 365. Well, Retain can support all of those systems. So if you have multiple email systems, Retain can archive it all. And it's archived in a platform agnostic format so that it doesn't matter what system is being archived. It's all accessible in one central unified archive. And if you ever need to move from one system to another, because it's in that format, it's easy to make that switch. Because let's say you're using Exchange today and it's all being archived in Retain, and tomorrow you want to move to Office 365. You simply keep archiving Exchange, go to Office 365, tie that to the Retain archive, and now you have the historical in Exchange, archiving the historical Exchange emails in Retain, and you have the Office 365 emails going forward that are being archived in Retain. And then you have other systems that are supported as well, and I'll show that in a minute, but there's social media mobile that's also archived into that same central archive. Then you have flexible archive access. You can access by an Outlook plugin or another email plugin, a GroupWise plugin. You can access it via Web Access Viewer. And you can access it via the Retain mobile archiving app. So there's an app that's being placed on your phone to be able to actually access the archive from wherever and whenever. And there's an offline viewer as well where you can export the archive to a separate viewer, and that can be accessed anytime, anywhere. Even if you don't have internet access, it can be simply placed on a jump drive or a CD or DVD. Next, you have this a Google-like search tool to be able to quickly and easily access your archive data. You know, that's key, right? Having an archive that just sits in the corner that you can never really access is kind of worthless, right? I mean, yes, you're compliant, I guess, because it's archived, but you don't have the ability to quickly and easily get to that, and you need to. And so that's what's important, to be able to have that search. Next, you have, this is a big one here, there's built-in e-discovery, litigation, and case management with redaction. So you don't have to worry about having a separate tool to be able to perform e-discovery or to be able to search or to be able to be ready for litigation. That's all included. And then I touched on this a little bit here, is the ability to archive, to have email and archive migrations. And then you have tagging is a big one. So as messages are archived, you can tag them as confidential, or you can have other rules that will tag them. And then messages that are already archived, you can do a search and tag them based on that search, based on like a project or maybe a case that you're involved in, and then you can go back and search those tags. And then mailbox holds, you can place different litigation holds and legal holds. You can do it on a mailbox level, a global level, or even a project level. There's different ways to be able to place those holds. Another thing that's great and is very unique is this ability to connect to other file systems. So if you're running SharePoint or Laserfish or Filer or other legacy ECM systems, as long as it has an index, Retain can connect to that index, and so when you do that search, it's going to be able to search those other types of ECM and pull that into that same central view, so that then you can go from there and perform actions on it. And then if you're looking for the cloud, there's multiple cloud options. You can have it in, there's the Guava data centers. You can use the AWS for the cloud, and then we can also do that via our cloud partners. So just depending on what you want to do, we can deploy that. So those are some of the things that kind of, at a high level, some of the things that make Retain different. I want to show you really quick another slide, kind of just talking about, here's all the platforms that are supported. As I talked about, there's the Exchange, GroupWise, Office 365, and Gmail for email. For social media, we support Pinterest, Instagram, LinkedIn, Google+, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Vimeo, and Flickr. So all of those types of information are archived. And then, of course, for mobile, it's iOS, Android, and BlackBerry. That's all archived into that central archive in Retain.
You you reminded me of a question asked by one of our, I guess is one. Someone explained it to me like this, and they asked like, "Well, there's built-in e-discovery with whatever 365, whatever. Why do I need a third party? Why do I need you?" And he explained it like this. Yet he had a. I was at a convention and he grabbed one of the plastic knives and he's like, "Well, technically this is you're required to have a knife and you have this plastic knife." And he's like, technically you're compliant, right? But having all the capabilities that Retain has, from litigation to just everything, it's like having a huge survival knife with the fishing gear and a compass and everything all attached to it. And he's like, you're being litigated against, and what do you want to have in this fight? Technically, the plastic knife, it's a knife, right? But when the rubber hits the road, and you have to use the data, you have to find it, you have to make it work for you. That's the big difference, right? Um, Sorry, don't mean to derail you there, Q. Another question: how does Retain help with all the requirements for archiving that you talked about earlier? What does I guess this our will here explains up a lot about what we do. Sorry, not what we do. What can Retain archive? And yeah, I guess you explained that one already. I jumped in the gun there. How about let's see, requirements? Yeah, the how does Retain help with all the different requirements for archiving, Q?
So yeah, that that's a great question. So we talked a lot about the different regulations that are out there, and that you need to be able to archive, and that you need to be able to quickly and easily access that. So what Retain does to help with that is that it archives all the required types of information that you have, and then it allows you to quickly and easily get to that information. And so that's the big thing here, the big value statement when it comes to Retain, is that you have all these types of communication that are being archived, or excuse me, that are being used in your organization. And you need to access that communication, and that's what the regulations state. So that's what Retain can do. Any kind of communication that you're using in your organization, Retain can archive that, and then you can quickly and easily get to that. And then, of course, there's the built-in e-discovery tools to be able to search that and be able to have an audit trail of what has been done and seen. So that's what Retain can do, is to help you comply with those regulations.
Awesome, thank you. So let's jump in for a little more detail on each aspect. How about we get asked a lot to show a little more detail. How does Retain work with Office 365, Exchange, Gmail, and GroupWise?
Okay, so when it comes to email in particular, Retain can securely archive, like we talked about a little bit, mixed messaging environments. There's e-discovery and publishing, the redaction and export to PDF, and then there's the web access archive viewer. But what I wanted to talk about with email in particular is Retain can archive, like we talked about a little earlier, any plan of Office 365 is archived. And Retain archives all the email, the attachments that go in the email, the appointments, the calendar items, any tasks are all archived into Retain. And what's great as well is that Retain archives with single instance storage. So if you're using Exchange, which doesn't support that, you can have your storage footprint's going to be a lot smaller because it's going to be archived into that in a single instance way, where one message is archived and it's point to one excuse me, many messages are archived, but in a single instance storage way, one message is archived and then it's pointed to that. So let's say I have a message that's been sent out to many people. Retains archived that, and in one instance, and then those other messages are pointed to that one archived message, so that your message footprint isn't quite as big. Also, so then with email in particular, you have, like I stated, many systems that are archived, all the appointments and tasks, and you have the ability to have the easily access that from the email system. So in here you have the example of an Outlook plugin where your user will be able to access that archive directly from Outlook. So they're in their email system. You'll see right there, there's an arrow that I'm pointing to here where you can see that they can quickly and easily access Retain. They can download the messages from Retain into Outlook. So if they're offline, they can actually cache those messages in Outlook so they can access them even if they're not online. And so we try and make it easy for your users to be able to quickly and easily access their archived messages from multiple systems and in multiple ways. So there you have the Outlook plugin, then you have the Web Access Archive Viewer. And from here, as you can see, the email system is replicated over. So your mailbox is sent over, your folder structure is replicated, so then when a user goes into their archive, they're going to be able to, it's going to look familiar to them. They'll be able to see their folders. They'll be able to see the messages in those folders. So we make it easy for your end users to access their archive. And that's something that's very important. Is we empower your users to be able to access that and to be able to perform functions that you can give them. So if you want to be able to allow your users to restore a message to the live inbox, they can. They can search their own personal archive, and that gives them the ability to do things that they would generally have to go to IT for. So now you're going to be able to free up resources for your IT department as well. Meaning, an example that we get a lot of is when it comes to email in particular, is that a user will lose an email, right? They will not know where an email is, or maybe it's been deleted off of their live system. You can allow them to go into their archive and be able to search that on their own, find that message, and restore it right back to their own email inbox on their own without having to bother IT. And then we talked about this before, but the search is an important part, right? Being able to quickly and easily access your archive is essential. And so here's a view of what we talked about earlier, which is the Google-like search. So when a user goes in and searches their personal archive, when they start to type in what they're searching for, once they get to 3 letters, it's going to start to suggest things that are in the archive. And so as you can see here, a search was done for the word test. It started to get messages that had test in there, and then that what is being searched is highlighted in the search results as well. And now a user can search their personal archive, but administrators and other named users can search the entire archive. So you can grant right. So an administrator can access the entire archive, and then you can grant rights to other teams. So say a legal team or other auditor needs to come in and search the archive, you can grant them those rights. They don't. You don't have to leave it up to your IT team to do that. You can actually grant rights to others, and then they can search the entire archive and perform functions as well. Let me go to the next one so you can see the results. Right. So when somebody searches, you're able to pull in all the results, no matter if that's Facebook messages, Twitter messages, email messages. Any kind of communication that's archived into Retain can be quickly and easily viewed from that one central unified archive. And what's great as well is when you do that search, there are tools, as we talked about, that are built in. As Sheldon talked about, you have that knife that has all the different tools on there to be able to make sure that you survive in the wilderness. In the same way here, if you're involved in litigation or an e-discovery request, or if you're just needing to manage your data, there are tools built into Retain to be able to let you do that. So there's the e-discovery tools and the search tools. So if a search is done, a named user can forward messages, they can export them, they can restore them to the live box, they can place litigation holds, they can tag these messages. When it comes to export in particular, this subset of, or excuse me, this search can be exported and placed onto what we like to call the standalone archive viewer. And I wanted to show that really quick because this is really important. The standalone archive viewer gives you the ability to have that subset, hand that off, place it on a jump drive or a DVD or something like a Dropbox, and be able to hand that off to an outside team that you don't maybe necessarily want accessing the entire archive. And from there, they can perform redaction. They can export again to PDF and be prepared for court. So when it comes to email archiving in particular, I know I went over a lot, but the idea is multiple email systems are archived. You can quickly and easily access that and do that search. And then there's the e-discovery tools that are built in to be able to give you the ability to be prepared in case of litigation or e-discovery.
Yes, our the e-discovery tools is often what is a shining light in the Gartner Magic Quadrant and Infotech Forrester. The power of our e-discovery is often highlighted, and that's something that we are proud of, that functionality and whatnot. Let's go on to social media. How about how does Retain? What does Retain do with social media?
Okay, great. So retain social. This is a big thing, and as we talked about earlier with the FRCP giving the same weight to social media as email, you need to be able to manage your social media data. And so retain social is unique in the sense that you have the ability to monitor and archive social media communication. And so let me touch on what that means. On the monitoring piece, the idea is that retain can archive, and you can set it so that it will archive almost real time, so that as messages are being posted onto your social media account, you can set it so that it quickly will archive into retain. And so when that goes down, you can set up alerts for keywords, questions, and personal identifiable info. So as a message is being archived, you can set up keywords that can trigger an alert telling you that, oh, this word has been posted, you need to do something about it. Or a question. There was a question placed, hurry and answer that question. Or somebody tried to post information that should not be on there, you need to get that off of there. So there's alerts that you can set up for that. So that's the idea of being able to monitor your social media. And then on the archiving piece is we've actually partnered with a company called Archive Social, and what we can do is Archive Social captures full resolution pictures, videos, GIFs, and other data formats, and it captures it in its native format. And I'll show you in a minute what it looks like, but the idea is that it looks just like it did when it was posted, so that when you go back and look at it, it's easy to see it, how it was posted, and easily able to search that. And then, of course, Retain ties to Archive Social, so they capture it, and then we pull it into Retain to be able to archive that in the same central archive as the email and mobile communication. And then the other great thing with Retain is it actually connects to social media accounts without the login info. So on your corporate account, you just need to make sure that somebody's logged in, and then there'll just be a quick thing that authenticates to it. And then for any other employee accounts that need to be monitored and archived because they're communicating in an official way, that can be done as well. And then your social media archiving doesn't have to happen on your network. It can be archived at any time and any place because it's authenticated directly to that account. A little bit more about the social media archiving. As we stated, it's in its native format. You can perform those searches that we talked about and place litigation holds on that kind of communication as well. You can search and tag messages as well, and you can have that complete historical archive. And then this picture here kind of shows, as the little circle did as well, the supported platforms, and then how Archive Social will take those supported platforms, capture them, and then push them into Retain, and then your end users and other named users can access that archive. Here's an example of a search, right? So that here's all the platforms that are supported, and you can quickly and easily do a search with date range, scope, and you'd be able to see them in their native format. Here's an example of how you can connect accounts. Once again, all you have to do is be logged in. Just click on which account. What it will do is it'll bring up a dialog box asking you to authenticate to that. And then once you're done, now you're off and running, archiving it. I wanted to make mention in particular of a couple of platforms when it comes to YouTube and Vimeo. When it comes to these videos, it actually archives the video, and so when you do a search and you see a YouTube video, you click on that, it'll open up an archive social, and you'll be able to see that actual video. So this is great for those organizations that have a lot of YouTube videos out there. I know that Guava TV, which is the Guava YouTube account, has tons of videos and it has historical videos, and those are changing constantly. By having an archive of that, you can go back and see what has been posted there, and then you can actually see what has been how people have interacted with those videos, because you can see comments and likes and dislikes as well. So that's the idea. Is this is especially important for your corporate social account to be able to have oversight of what's going on, but it can also be used for your employees that are communicating in an official manner, and it's archived into that same central archive as email is.
Also, I just wanted to add in there that the different types of social media accounts, it's always growing, right? There are social media platforms that are working, being added currently and in the roadmap. So just in case there wasn't one that on there that you are interested in, please reach out to us, as it's very well possibly is on the roadmap, especially if it's used commonly for business interactions. Um, let's see, how does mobile archiving work with Retain? Do we have any examples there?
Great. So absolutely. So yeah, as we've been talking about a lot of different things, mobile's one that's huge and important. And right now, there are three platforms that are supported, and these are the major platforms, right? You have iOS, Android, and BlackBerry, and Retain can archive the different platforms in different ways. So for BlackBerry, it's really simple. We just tie directly to the BlackBerry Enterprise Service, and we pull everything down from there. So to your users, it's seamless. They don't have to do anything. They just use their BlackBerries. We tie to the BlackBerry Enterprise Service and pull down all text messages, phone call logs, BBM messages, PIN messages, and BBM protected. And actually, with BBM protected, it can be deployed on BlackBerry, Android, or iOS, and we actually tie directly to the BBM protected app. So if that's a solution that you're using in your organization, we can archive it directly from that without having to have a BES server. For Android, what we do is we actually place an app on the Android device, and this can be deployed using an MDM or an EMM solution. Most of the major ones are supported, and they can push this app out. And so that app is placed on the phone, and what that does is it pulls everything down. It pulls down all the text messages, so SMS, MMS, and phone call logs from the Android device, and that's the native stuff, and it pulls it directly in. This would be great for organizations that have corporate issued Android devices. Probably not as good for BYOD because it's pulling everything down. So it's going to pull down personal stuff as well if they're using it for both. But that's how it works with Android. And then for iOS, there's actually a separate app that's placed onto your phone, and we've partnered with a company called CellTrust. And so that CellTrust app is placed onto your phone, and once again, that can be pushed out through an MDM or an EMM solution, and that's pushed out to the phones, and that actually assigns a separate phone number to the phone for business communication, and it allows for text messaging as well, and that's all used via that app. So that stays separate from the personal communication. So there's business communication is done via the app, and then personal communication is done via the native stuff. And so Retain ties directly to that app and pulls that communication down and archives that. And this can also be deployed on Android, but because iOS is locked down, this is the only way to archive iOS, because the native stuff can't be archived because Apple's locked that down. But for BYOD, this dual persona is the best way to go, because now your users can use their personal side of the phone, and then they can use the app to communicate in the business manner. And then here's just kind of a view of how it works. So if you have employees that are communicating internally, and they're communicating from one employee to another, and they're both using the CellTrust app, that's all encrypted and secure, all that communication, and it's all archived as well. If they're communicating outside of their organization using the CellTrust app, it's going to be encrypted up until it hits the carrier. Once it hits the carrier, it's not encrypted anymore, and then that can then go out to external people, and that's not secure and encrypted, but you can have oversight of that because it archives that into Retain. And so really the use cases for that, Sheldon asked if we have some examples of that. The use cases are, when it comes to mobile archiving, if you have corporate issued devices, you can use the BlackBerry, if it's BlackBerry or Android, we can collect everything on that phone. So if corporate issued devices are BlackBerry or Android, we're going to pull everything down. If your corporate issued device is iOS, usually our best practice would tell you to shut down the native iOS and the native dialer and to just use the CellTrust app and have your employees communicate only through that. So that's the corporate issued device side of it. For the BYOD, we would suggest that you use the CellTrust app and use it in a dual persona, and that can be in either iOS or Android, and have that separation where that app allows you to communicate, call, text using a separate mobile business number that's assigned to the phone, and then your users can continue to use their personal side for the personal stuff. And then this question also gets asked a lot. If a person's communicating email, if they're wanting to access your email server, you can allow them to do that, and it's not going to affect the archiving piece of it because Retain ties directly to the email system to be able to archive, and so it doesn't matter how they're sending emails via your corporate account, it's all archived into Retain. So even if they're accessing it on their mobile device, Retain ties directly to the email system to be able to archive that.
What happens if a user has multiple mobile devices? How does Retain handle that?
So what Retain does with multiple devices is that it's tied by per user. I know that this is pretty common for users to have multiple devices, but so what it does is Retain recognizes it by the user. So if let's say I have an Android device and an iOS device, it's still going to be viewed as my device because of the way we authenticate it. So if it's me as an end user is going in, I'm going to be able to see both of my devices and be able to see what's archived there. And then an administrator will be able to view everything that's archived and be able to see that those devices belong to me as an employee. And then pricing wise, I know this question is brought up a lot. We price it by mobile device. So each mobile device that needs to be archived, that's what you're going to be charged by. And so yeah, that's how it works with multiple devices.
Awesome, thank you. So we've gotten into the what, why, and the how of everything archiving with Retain. So what are my next steps? What do I need to do now?
So just to kind of go over again, the summary of everything we've talked about is that this box kind of sums it up, right? An archive, you need to have an archive. You need to do it to manage your data. You need to do it to be compliant with regulations. But it needs to be a living, breathing system, right? You need to be able to have all of these communications archived into one central archive, but then you need to, unlike legacy archiving systems, we like to call Retain an archiving 2.0 solution because you need to be able to archive all of these types of communication, and you need to easily and quickly get to them. So that's kind of a summary of everything we've talked about, is that you need to archive and you need to access them, and you need to have tools to be able to easily and quickly get to those, and Retain can do that for you. You don't have to have a separate solution for each different kind of communication that you're using. You can have one solution that will archive everything. And as Sheldon talked about, it will grow with you as well. So if you have social media accounts today that aren't listed on there, we're always looking at adding them. And if you have email archiving today and you want to add social media or mobile tomorrow, that's something that you can quickly and easily add on to Retain. You can deploy it for what your needs are today, and it will grow as you grow. So the next step is what the question was, is I would suggest that you get a personalized demo, see how it can work for you particularly, ask questions that pertain directly to your environment. See how it's going to work for if you're using BYOD, how it's going to work for that, how it's going to work for your particular email setup, for the number of seats you have. Get a personalized demo of it. You can also get a quote. Go ahead and see how much it's going to cost for you. I think you'd be surprised, pleasantly surprised, especially if you've looked at other archiving vendors. Infotech in particular, which is an analyst firm, came out and said that Retain is one of the best value solutions, especially for highly regulated industries. So we actually got an award for best value from Infotech when it came to enterprise information archiving. So yeah, find out what it will cost for you. Um, and and if you have other questions, feel free to reach out to us and contact us. So that would be your next steps.
Thank you, Q. Do you have any examples? A lot of people like to, see some organizations that are using Retain.
Yeah, we have some great successes that we've seen with Retain. Um, One in particular, I can't go into too many details of it, but we know that the Baltimore Police Department was recently involved in some scandals, and they were asked to produce uh, email communication. Well, they used Retain, and so they were quickly and easily able to access that communication and get it over to the correct people that were requesting it within the time allotted. And so that's a big thing, is that once we, like we talked about before, you may have an archive, but you need to be able to easily and quickly get to it. Well, Baltimore Police Department, they were able to access the pertinent information and do it quickly and easily and get it over within the time allotted. Another example is the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. So we've got a few here. They use Retain. They're a more recent customer, and they had nothing before, and they use Retain now, and they can archive all of their email communication, um, and it's compatible with their current system, and they're actually moving to Office 365, so they can actually continue to archive their former email system, and they were using it to be able to move to Office 365 and archive their up and coming system. So that's a great example of how you can have an email system today that you're running and archive it with Retain, and then move to a new system and continue to archive it and have it all in that central archive. Another example that we like to talk about is the LAPD. They've been with us for a long time. And one of the reasons why they chose our solution is because of its security and the ability to have all that information in that central archive, um, and, and have it in a central, secure data center. So they actually have it in their own personal data center, but they have it there secure, and they can instantly and quickly access their communication, because, as we know, a police department can be involved in a lot of um, investigations, a lot of audits to be able to see what's going on. The other thing too is that they're using Retain in that unified way in which they're using it for email archiving, and they're also using it to archive their roughly 8,000 devices that they have, their mobile devices. And they're also using it for their official social media account. So if you ever go onto the LAPD social media account and you see what's going on there, just know that all of that information is being archived so they can quickly and easily get to that. And they're doing something innovative as well, where they can actually use it to archive their body camera footage. And they do it in a way, I can't go into too many details, but that's all archived into that same central archive, so that when they go in and they do a search, it can all be brought in and viewed from that central archive. So those are a few examples. We obviously have many more, and there's customers from all walks of life. We have many customers that are using Retain for email, for social media, and for mobile. But yeah, once again, I encourage you to reach out to us and see how that can work for you. And I'd like to thank everyone for being on this webinar and for taking the time to learn more about Retain. And we are glad that you came by Gartner as well, the Gartner Symposium, to see us.
Awesome. Thank you, Q. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Again, this webinar was recorded, and everyone will receive that recording. So look for that email. Again, if you need a specific demo, please reach out to us. We'd like to hear, like Q said, in the Gartner Magic Quadrant or Infotech, please reach out to us so we can get that for you as well. Also encourage you to visit our YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/guavatv. That's GWAVA, not like the fruit. You can access old webinars, videos, and thank you again for being with us.